right, let's go ahead and get started. Some more people might filter in as we go, but thank you everybody for joining, especially to our candidates. My name is Andy Andalicourt. I am the Director of Education here at Eve University, and today we are here for our second session of our CSM Townhall, where we have multiple candidates joining us who will be up for vote as of downtime tomorrow morning to talk about their platforms and then engage in a question and answer session. So some quick admin up top. The first thing we're going to do is a 3 to 5 minute intro for each of the candidates. I've randomized the order of expected candidates here for today. So I'll call on a candidate. We'll link your Eve Forums campaign post into the Discord chat, and then you'll have the floor for 3 to 5 minutes to introduce yourself and your platform. A reminder for everyone listening in. So a few things. First of all, if you are not a CSM candidate, please disconnect yourself from the class presentations channel. We are using that for the Twitch stream, and any candidates that want to turn on their camera can. So our communications manager, Hipla, will either stream your video cam if you have it on, or your character profile picture during your introduction. For all of our listeners, go ahead and please use the class questions channel in Classroom Alpha for any chat or questions you have. Candidates feel free to engage, discuss, even answer questions in there during the stream. When we get to Q&A, I will ask actual questions that I'll ask actual questions that will be up for the floor in voice, even if they've been answered a little bit in text. That's okay. For listeners, please keep the voice channel clear for the candidates. There should be no need to mic up during the session. This is just the floor for the candidates to speak. I myself am taking too much time as it is instead of highlighting our candidates. Keep in mind some of our candidates might be English second language, so bear with them if there's any mistranslations. Please don't hold it against anybody. We are happy to have them here, and some of us just don't speak English as well. I don't even speak English that great. And Unicoms. On Eve University, we promote family-friendly communications. Candidates, if a swear word here or there slips in, I'm not gonna clamp down on you, no worries. However, the Discord will. There are filters on that will filter out and prevent certain messages from even getting into the Discord chat if they can insert in choice language. 3 to 5 minutes for the intros. I will give a in-chat channel 4-minute warning, and then 15 seconds before, just interject with a quick time check, just so you know to wrap up. Same thing for Q&A. When we get to Q&A, it'll be 1 to 2 minutes per response. I'll talk about the Q&A when we get there, how we'll administrate it through the channel, and give that reminder. So before we get started, any questions from the candidates?
That's a no, I guess.
Yes, sir. Okay, let me get to my schedule here, see who's here. Then we will start with Dujek in a second here. We'll give Hipla a second to get the stream set up for you. I will link your post, and then I'll give you your time. So 1 moment. Sorry, I didn't have my timer up. Apologies for the delay. And Dujek, the floor is yours, 3 to 5 minutes.
Hello, I am Dujek Oneye. I started playing Eve 9 years ago, and a bit, and I've spent most of my Eve career with Brave Collective. I've tried out living in every area of space, and currently I spend a lot of time doing special interest groups in the Brave Collective. So I do Poachman, Wormholes. I am the AT team captain, so I enjoy my mid to small gang fights, and also very large fights as well. I unashamedly enjoy watching a movie and slogging it out in tie-dye once in a while, just not too often. I'm running on a campaign of like trying to get more small and frequent updates to the game. I think that there are a lot of unloved ships and a lot of unloved areas of content in EVE that do not get updated all that frequently, and a lot of people who would enjoy doing that content more often if it saw a little bit more attention in like small things, quality of life and so on. I'm not running on a platform of like grand improvements and changes to the game. I'm not a game designer. I just care about the game a lot. I am on both the Poachman and the Wormhole ballot, as well as being one of the block candidates. But I have a lot of time to listen to different people who want to bring stuff forward to the CSM, and I think that is the fun part about running for CSM. It's all the people I've talked to in process of campaigning and would like to continue to talk to. You can catch me on Discord or in-game, or I will set up some other methods of getting a hold of me, like email for those who prefer that. And yeah, give me all your votes. That would be nice.
All right, Dujek, thank you very much for that introduction. Next, we will be moving on to DutchGunner. Give us a second to get the stream set up. I will link your post and then we'll get started. So one moment. And DutchGunner, the floor is yours, 3 to 5 minutes.
Hello everyone, my name is DutchGunner. I'm an independent candidate here to represent everybody in EVE. I've been playing EVE since 2003, and I've done everything in the game except for scamming, because that's just a line I won't cross. My current specializations lie in high sec mechanics, Poshfan, lore, and defense. I've got a post with what you could expect from me, changes that I would like to see in the game, because it depends on whether it fits in what CSM is working on. And overall, you could reach me on Discord, EVE Mail. I also regularly check the EVE forums and Reddit. And I would like to represent all of you, and if you have any questions regarding live events or any of the public fleets I regularly organize, feel free to reach out to me.
All right, thank you very much, DutchGunner. We will get going with Dario next. Let me get your post set up and let Hippoly get the stream set up, and then I'll give you the OK in a second. Dario, 3 to 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Okay. Hi everyone. I'm very independent in this game, I guess. I started playing way back in 2005 after resisting a friend's persuasion to come and try out this new game, and I've pretty much played ever since then. I've mostly lived around high-sec, low-sec areas, but I've spent quite a lot of time existing in wormhole space, and a few little visits to nullsec and Pochfin, which was very interesting. That didn't end very well, but it was fun. And I guess I probably aim to help, the smaller players in the game, and particularly, I guess, the newer players. EVE's put in a very good new player experience, which it's been tweaked a bit, and it's pretty good, but I still think could be maybe a little bit more after that can help players kind of progress a bit further in the game, because at the moment they seem to get to the career agents and then it's like, oh, okay, grind, is that it? And they may get a little bit lost. And I think places like EVE Uni is very great because that takes a lot of the newer players who can find their way there, and it gives them some good training and some good guidance in what they can do in the game after that sort of level, and just helping them. And I guess the people I'd want to represent, not so much just the new players, but also the smaller players that have been playing a while and tend to find that the game may be a little bit balanced against them because they can't, bring in those groups of 20, 50, 100 odd players for fleets when they need them. So they're pretty much at the beck and call of the big groups and the multi-boxes that can use their ISK and their time and resources to kind of have an advantage in the game that they may not have. One of the areas I was looking at in that regard was probably maybe a reiteration of the war deck mechanics, so that Corps can't just pretty much war deck everyone they want in high sec and have free reign of kills. I think that if you're going to war deck somebody, it needs to have maybe a strategic reason, and maybe with that a cost as well to make it worthwhile for you, not just for the ease of getting those kills. And also related to that, I think also maybe the structures could use a bit more of a love again. Maybe one of the key things I was looking at was a bit more variation in how they fit and what kind of resources they have available for them. Because at the moment I think a lot of people have kind of like, okay, well they're nice, but you can put this and that on, but that's very limiting. So a lot of people just basically these days look at them as being a sunk cost once they put them down, and rather than getting, I guess, fights around them, most people are just prepared to let them go and then just wait it out and replace them, whereas it's probably not exactly all that good for either side. And also there's a lot of quality of life features and quality assurance factors in the game, such as there's still a few little things with the user interface that I think it's got to a point where CCP's happy with it, and they're like, well, we could look at that later if we've got time and resources. But it could maybe get a bit more love and bug fixing in places, and a bit more customization, so that you can have more colors than just the ones that they've got at the moment. And I'm pretty independent, so I don't think I'm any block votes at the moment. So just aiming to get as many votes around as I can, and at least being this my first time ever, even if I don't get in this time, it's good experience for maybe next time if I try. And so that's about it for now. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much, Dario. Next up, we will have Corporal Fillip give us a second for the stream setup. I'll link your post and then we'll get started. Corporal Fillip, the floor is yours, 3 to 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'm usually the first place that people find me is in Rookie Help. I've been there for virtually my entire career since 2009. The second way they'll find me is through a gift program. A lot of you know that Mike Azaria has a gift program. I've had one for nearly as long, and it's about providing modules that will help new players with ship fitting. A lot of my campaign is about making sure that rookie players and recent players know the game and understand how to play it before they get frustrated, and discover enough about the game in a positive way that they might continue with us. I'm not sure that I know nearly as much about the game as a lot of you already in the channel here, but and certainly not about PvP or null, but a lot of the focus, as I said, is getting more players into the game, getting people to stay longer, And I think that'll help the overall health.
All right, thank you very much, Corporal Fillip. Next up, we'll have Yondu Quill. Give us a moment to get the stream set up in your post, and then we'll get started. Yondu, the floor is yours, 3 to 5 minutes.
Thank you. So hello, I'm Yondu Quill. I am on the ballot of the Brave Collective. However, I will be representing the topics of industry in this CSM summit. If you vote for me, I would love to, even then, if I'm on the Brave ballot, to be representing all of industry in EVE, whether it's nullsec, highsec, or lowsec, whether it's hauling or mining. So my story started in EVE 2017 when I started in our highsec mining Valspar, and that didn't end up well. And then I decided to listen to my friend who recommended me to EVE and visit like the nullsec alliance that became my home. And I started building stuff there, basically starting very small, started building ammo, small T1 ships, and then I ended up building Caps, Titans, building Brave, backbone of Capital Fleet. And one of the things that were like the decisive moment for me for EVE were when I built some of the keep stars, one of which ended up destroying 2 largest super coalitions in game. So I believe that even when you're small in game as such, you can have a very impactful decisions if you decide to play it how you want to play it. And I would sort of want to represent the wild card there, even for the industry. Even if it seems boring, you still can have that impact on the game. And that's sort of the platform I would like to run for. So feel free to vote for me if you would want to.
Thank you very much, Yondu. Next up, we will have Dhuras. Like I said, if you get disconnected, no worries. We'll move to the next and then wrap back around to you. Just give me a moment to get your post linked and stream set up, and then we'll get started.
Sounds good. Just gonna check the mic here. On a trip
Sounds
and have
great.
to do this on my phone, so it's kind of jank at the moment.
Sounds great.
Hopefully you don't hear dogs barking in the background or some crows.
It's all right. I'm sure we're all used to it. But post is up, 3 to 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Great. Okay, so I'm Dhuras. I've been playing this since, I want to say 2009, but I'm probably wrong without my character sheet in front of me. I think like most people started on highsec way back in the day, doing missions, moved on to doing a little bit of lowsec, nullsec stuff, eventually circled into wormholes, and been doing kind of like small gang wormhole, venturing into lowsec, nullsec stuff pretty much ever since. Been doing a bunch of industry on the side for a long time too, so I've got very much like a wormhole, lowsec, nullsec kind of PvP focused person, but I've got a good general base of knowledge, so I'm pretty good about understanding how all the systems interact with each other on a general level. I'm not too hyper focused on one thing and can't see how what I love will maybe negatively affect something else. My focus mainly would be on basically getting more smaller objectives out in space that people can be out and doing things over, fighting over. Right now, mostly it's going to be just large structures. That's a multi-day thing. Could be several days you got to come back for that. We're all busy. We have work. We don't all always have time to do that. So I'd like to see bring back some smaller objectives people can do, just like a raid over or something to fight over, something where you are not so committed to it, because if you lose that structure, everything's gone, which encourages everyone to just drop everything they have. Something smaller, maybe a few resources someone can steal. Kind of in the same plane the ESSs are at right now, but let's get us a little more variety. Let's get us, because if anyone's done a bunch of ESSs knows, the meta gets stale after a bit. It's only one way to fight. It'd also just be a nice way for people to, affect your space a little more. Right now, you've only got a couple options for things to anchor. Let's give you a way to have more ways to make your place feel like home. Anchor some, a multitude of different types of interesting structures. Let's get some experimental things going on. You could bring back a mechanic, say akin to the old moon mining stuff, because there are always a lot of fights over those. I know the argument is then people aren't mining it themselves and they aren't mining barges in space, but I'm using that more as a jumping off point to come up with ideas and like, what can we do to get people out there doing stuff. I'd even love to see not even necessarily super functional things that are fun to anchor, monuments. Let's let people put up an obelisk to wave their E-peen around in their space where it doesn't do anything, but it's fun to look at and it's fun to shoot at to get them to come shoot at you. Kind of on that, I'd also very much be pushing CCP to finally, if anyone remembers back when CCP Seagull was around, fulfill the promise of removing pauses and replacing those, because I'm sure as many of us have interacted with those, they still suck to work with. They suck to fight. They're not. They're kind of miserable to work with on all ends. So I'd really like them to finally follow through on that promise. I think that's my main focus. I got a sexy little campaign video you can go check out in there. And I would say just generally as a candidate, I'm a pragmatic person. If you think there's something that I advocate that you think is like just absolutely completely dead wrong, like message me, convince me. I'm opening to listening to what people have to say. I'm aware that I can only experience so much in the game, and I will have blind spots. So I'm always interested to hear what other people would say, like, hey, interesting idea, but here's why it would be bad, or maybe it needs to be tweaked. I'm interested in the debate side of things on the CSM. I think that's all it for me.
Thank you very much, Dhuras. Next up, we'll have Nuke. Give us a moment to get your stream set up and the post, and then we'll get started. Nuke, 3 to 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
All right. I am Nuke Michael. I am running as a low-sec candidate this year. I fly with Snuffed Out right now. My platform mostly is a focus on, not mostly specifically low-sec, but I have experience in other places, but focusing on low-sec, iterating on the faction warfare changes that have been happening recently that have been really helpful, but haven't really gone through their completion yet, as well as pushing for more passive income for alliances, like the guy before me mentioned. The LP tax that CCP has done a good job of that, and they need to continue with that sort of stuff because it helps smaller groups. I've talked to FW groups that have started expanding their SRP programs and pushing for caps now because they have that extra income that CCP has given with LP tax, and it really helps smaller groups, and CCP should continue on that path. Outside of that, I guess a bit of my history in EVE. I've flown with Snuff the past few years. Before that, I was in Gillente Faction Warfare with Wings, and before that, I was with Signal Cartel. And I lived in their Wormhole campus for a while, so I've kind of been everywhere for a little bit and done a lot, fighting both low-sec and null-sec with Snuff. I've done Wormholes, and I been around the block. That's all for me.
All right, thank you very much, Nuke. And next up, we'll have Rots. I saw that you were disconnecting and such, so if you're having some trouble, like with Dhuras before, we'll wrap back around to you. Afterward. Sorry about the connection issues.
It's all right. We got a guy coming in about an hour, so we'll see what happens.
Yep. So let me get your post linked, and then we'll get started. Rots, 3 to 5 minutes. Floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm Rots, Mijnwerker. I'm an FC in the U.S. time zone command member for we form blob. I've been in games since 2005. Started playing when I was 13, so you can laugh at that a bit. I'm on the tickets. I haven't reached out to anyone. I haven't specifically asked to be on the tickets. That's probably and arguably a downside, something I hope the CSM looks out for resolving. I'm a big candidate for small alliances. I've started many, and I've tried different ways to get them into nullsec. And some ways work and some ways don't, based off the meta and game is currently balanced and the mechanics work. I am a huge fan of community building, like I said before, and that includes the mechanics around being able to make corporations alliances. I love the idea of changing the diplomacy tab and how we do it. I don't think it's been touched in years. I'm also a really big fan of different areas of space. While I do play in nullsec a lot, I travel through low and get a lot of fights in low sec. I get a lot of fights in wormhole space. They're a great community. And then I also have recently done some stuff with high sec with the removal of the large structures and tranquility and yada yada. I really hope that people vote for me because they want a candidate who's entirely driven to finding resolution and moving forward with EVE Online mechanics. I'm not going to be a person who sits in a room and puts a stick in the mud. That's not me. I am going to be a person who will personally tell you I am voting for candidates that aren't all doing what I'm doing, because I want a CSM that I work with that represents every part of EVE. I have on many occasions thought about running over my years playing, and this time is different because I feel a little bit more able to do it, and I feel like there's a lot of other candidates I can jive with, and I hopefully see that you guys would vote for me, as well as other candidates on different platforms. I would 100% love to be on a ticket with Dujek, and I would love to be on a ticket with Angry Mustache, because those are two players that I don't inherently have the viewpoints they do. But the biggest part about EVE Online is community, and I hope you guys vote for me because I am voting for community in our greater EVE Online community. I'm a big fan of small new bro groups. I would love to see CCP continue to put investment into bringing in new players. I happen to be in a time zone that is renowned for having a small player base nowadays. U.S. time zone, while it's not as small as the Australian time zones, I've seen a drastic loss of player base in the U.S. time zone over the last 2 years, and I think a lot of that has to do with the content provided, how we present to the U.S. time zone player base, and more importantly, I am a big proponent of making sure that everyone gets exactly what they pay for, and the cost associated with subscriptions weighs in well with what we provide in the CSM and CCP for the content of our players in EVE Online. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rots. I believe we had Melicien here a moment ago. They moved out of the channel. I'm not sure if they had to step away. If they do come back in, we'll get them their 3 to 5 minute time. Outside of Melicien, I believe that's all of our candidates that have not presented an intro yesterday or today. So if I'm missing somebody, please speak up and let me know.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. You had moved out of the channel for a moment. Hipla got you back in, so we'll give you your 3 to 5 minutes next. Let me get your post linked into the chat.
Let's see. You can hear me now? 3 to 5 minutes. Let's see. I've been playing for almost 20 years. Let's see. Started off. I've done almost everything combat related, but I'm not focusing. I'm not I'm hardcore PvP or anything. But let's see. Really focused on the precursor storyline and everybody involved in that, both people living in Pajven and EdenCom players as well. Recent focus on mid-class wormholes like C4s, especially C4s with good statics. And yeah, I guess I'm really running for the 2 extra slots to see if whatever my focuses are what CCP needs. But that's about me for right now. Sorry.
No, thank you very much for the introduction. And last call I think I covered everybody, but has any candidate not gotten a chance for an introduction yet? Okay, we will move into the question and answer session. I'll go over what that's going to be like a little bit. First of all, for anybody attending and listening in, do absolutely feel free to use the chat and class questions in Classroom Alpha. Candidates, feel free to engage in the chat in there. Outside of the chat, I will be moving into asking questions and putting them to the floor. And for the question and answer session, each candidate will have 1 to 2 minutes to provide a response. I do ask that we try to limit back and forth. So if you've responded, please leave the floor to the other candidates to respond. What I will do is in the class questions channel in Classroom Alpha, above where candidates are linked to video, the channel above that, I will put the question to the floor in the chat. And then candidates, I ask that you put a reaction onto my question post in class questions. And based on those reactions, as each of you finish answering, I'll call on the next one to answer. Like I said, people can ask questions in the chat and you guys can freely engage, so those won't necessarily get to the floor. If I see a really neat question, I might pull it and add it to for the next question. So other than that, let's get started. I'll post the first question and then I'll ask it verbally, and candidates, please remember to react to the question if you wanted to answer that one. Last thing is, you are not obviously required to answer if it's not your area of expertise, for example. So the first question for the floor is, what part of a new player's experience would you most like to change? Please go ahead and react if you wanted to answer. So we'll start with Rot. Please go ahead, 1 to 2 minutes.
Thank you. The biggest part I would like to change is really specifically PI missions. Right now, there's not a lot that engages players in PI other than other players. Fight me on that, but that's my personal view. Missions need to be engaging. There was actually a group that was on Pando's stream the other night, and I believe it was Oz who said no one plays EVE Online for the missions. I disagree and agree all at the same time. I wish we had more things that engage new players in the game other than just our communities. And that could be a rebuff and a relook at our missions. It could be a relook at the different contents we provide. Right now, you might find the newest content that's coming out might be the most engaging. And that's where I lean on like an angry mustache to tell me what graphs show what. I would be very interested in bringing new players things that are engaging to get them stuck in the game first, because that's what I had when I started playing, is it was so much to play that I was engaged.
All right, thank you, Rot. Next up, Yondu, floor is yours, 1 to 2 minutes.
Right, so for the largest part that there is for the new player is the barrier that you are basically thrown into this big lake of EVE Online. And there is some basic training, that there is like few missions that you can run, but it doesn't stop the experience when you are there for like 2 or 3 days. You're trying to find stuff in the game, and then suddenly you are being ganked, somebody kills your ship, and you lose everything. And that's basically a deterrent for you to continue play the game as you would want to have it without being onboarded by, let's say, nullsec alliance or something like that. So I think there is empty space that can be filled with how do you want to stop the new bro from escaping this feeling that yes, you lost the ship, but that's the normal way how the EVE is played, and yet you want them to continue in the game.
All right, thank you, Yondu. Next up will be Melicien. The floor is yours.
How's it going? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I think the new player experience has come a long way in 20 years. When I first started playing, it was really like there wasn't one, you know? And so one thing that I think is really important is D-scan. New players are just not taught how to D-scan. It feels like a really big oversight considering how important the mechanic is for survival in the game. But that's really it. Put D-scan somewhere in there.
All right, thank you, Melicien. Next up will be Dario. Floor is yours.
Yeah, so I think the new play experience they have now is way better than what we had when we started, like way back in 2005. It was like, okay, here we are in space, what do we do? And I had help from a friend, and then later a couple of friends who had been playing for a while to help me figure out stuff in Eve, and then a lot of playing myself. But I think the current new player experience, it's good in that it does explain to you, ship loss and pod loss, and that it's kind of just a set kind of path of the course. You get that. It's just a matter of being able to prepare for it and deal with it and move on. But it would be nice also after that, once you get to the end of that tutorial, which just kind of explains combat and mining to a degree, if they had a little bit more that explains all the options available in Eve. I mean, a lot of people come in and see it's just, it's a PvP game, okay? Or it could be a mining game, but there's lots of other little niche areas that aren't explained. And if like those career agents were a little bit more engaging than just a text box, they could explain a lot more of the facets of Eve and the different options that players have available for them, and help players to kind of sort out their own goals and what they want to aim for to, continue playing Eve once they've got past those first few little experiences and pickups if they've lost a ship, for instance, and give them a bit more of an overall idea of what is available out there and how they can get by and create their own goals and continue.
Thank you very much. Next up, Nuke. The floor is yours.
All right. I actually I ran through the new play experience earlier this week for making a totally not spy alt, and it has come a long way, and I think SP has done a really good job of kind of especially easing players and pushing them into the career agents, which before was something you kind of had to be able to do. You got to go finish the tutorial. But I would say my biggest issue right now is that it doesn't do anything that you do the credence, you can make do bloodstained stars, this arc, and then at most the game has gotten you into the shorter, you've been dropped off beyond. There's no, and as you go later into the game, there's no more tutorials. Oh, sorry. Someone say something?
I think the moderator has
second.
disconnected. You sound good right now. You should go back and say that again for a minute.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I was saying that I'll go back to the start, I guess. I ran through the tutorial recently, and I thought it was pretty good, but the game doesn't do anything afterwards. Like, you go through the Systems of Eve arc, and then that's it. If you want to move on to bigger things later, if you want to... There's zero in-game pop-up tutorials for, oh, here's a damp, here's how a damp works. CP has made some great videos, but those are all outside of Eve, and there's kind of no mid-level tutorial. There's no, here are some advanced mechanics for Eve tutorials. That's entirely absent, and I think that would be a big help for players in making it so, oh, if you don't get into a player card that will teach you, you're just kind of screwed, would be less of an issue.
I have to agree with others said before. The new player experience has improved a lot, and with what the current iteration is, I don't think it needs any changing. It covers the basic. It's more about what comes after, because initially in the way before days 2003, you were just dropped in space and that was it. Good luck finding your way around. And now you have the introduction, you've got a storyline hook to try to figure out more, but it just ends really abruptly. So I think they would do well to actually improve upon what comes next, help them find the career agents, tell them these are the options, and definitely help indicate them to the many different player corporations and alliances that are out there that could help them if they find the right corp for them. And that's okay to switch corps or alliances if it doesn't work out for you.
I'll chime in. Okay, so the thought process about the NPE, have a lot of the new player experience has been massively buffed comparatively to what it was before. But I also think that in many ways I would like to see more of the NPE starting material to kind of shift more to the air stations. It kind of feels like a shame that they put these really kind of cool stations in the game and they're not used outside of that. Now I can understand maybe we send for special missions and career agents specifically tied to our faction. It's like trying to train us on our specific faction ships. But I think the majority of the early starting career agent stuff should be shifted to the air stations. And then once you get done with that, then you go for advanced training, particularly with your faction at the school that you start with.
I am, thank you, and sorry about that interruption. I did obviously lose track of who has and has not answered, so were there any other candidates that wanted to weigh in that have not on the question on the floor?
I will take a stab at it as well, as many people are touching on like the transition from the missions at the start. Like the handoff is not great. And I think one of the issues that needs to happen is the new player experience needs to be lifted up a bit in terms of the value of that experience, because we've had such a high amount of inflation, and I've spoken to some of the new player corps about this, and the amount of time you need to put in as a new player in order to like get a viable ship for, say, Sisters of Evark has way increased, where the entire new player's experience that is in the game at the moment gives a total of 11.5 million ISK, and that is like for a new player often like a multi-day process, and you still don't come out of it all that well off, especially if you, as Yondu said, end up getting ganked because you tried to take a shortcut through low sec or whatever. Secondly, corp finding is bad in this game at the moment. If you set up a corp and check all the boxes for we do PvP, we do PvE, we do mining, we are active in all time zones, you don't actually find those corps as they are. Like often people will say that they do a lot of stuff and they don't, or they will say that they are active in all time zones and they're not. I think that if C-Kill can show people the true activity level of a corp, then it should be reflected in the corp ads as well.
All right, thank you very much. And are there any other candidates that haven't weighed in on this question on the floor that want to?
Yeah, I can go real quick. Sorry, I've been reacting to Discord. I'm not actually able to have the Discord where I'm at the moment. Yeah, I think that everyone else said it. It's better than it was. I'm gonna be. I'm sorry, I don't remember who said it. You were talking about like linking in-game or some of those out-of-game tutorials in-game. I think that's great. More info that can be in-game without people having to search third-party all the time for stuff would be great. I'm 100% stealing that idea if I get elected. I will credit you, I promise. But I think I'm going to say, I think that a lot of people mentioned, like, it's hard that the game drops you off at a certain point. I think this is simply an inherent part of EVE to a certain degree and what it is. There's only so much CCP can do, and if you can put in as many systems as you like, there's always the human element of interaction in terms of like finding corps, finding people, learning what's out there. I think everyone who plays this can agree it simply is not a game for everyone. and there's only so much you can do up until a certain point to show people what is there. Part of, I think, what made Eve unique culturally for a lot of people that came to it is that you did have to find your own way to a certain degree. I think that we can definitely do a little better with some of the advanced mechanics and whatnot, but I think when I've been like helping show newer people things, the mechanics were important, but more importantly was really more a philosophical difference of like, okay, look, I know you love your ship. It will die. Everything you love will eventually die in this, and you need to accept that. And I had met people who'd played it for like 6 months, and it still did not click for them, and they eventually washed out. I think the tutorials did a good job of getting them all the way out. They'd played for like some amount of time, but it simply was not a game for them because they could not get over how this game was. It was not something that was a good fit for them. So I think there's only so much CCP can do to a certain degree on that. And at a certain point, people have to dive into the deep end of Eve, and it's going to be sink or swim, and you will find out if this is the thing you want to keep doing. You know, if you can lose ships, you can get ganked, you can pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and say, okay, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to figure this out. Like, great, you will survive. You're going to enjoy this. Like, Eve is inherently unforgiving, and at a certain point, the game cannot coddle you anymore over that, I guess, is what would be my position on that.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any other weigh-ins for anyone that hasn't responded yet? Okay, so let's move to the next question. And like yesterday, it'll be a slightly different question, but we're shifting away from the new player and more to the end game with, what do candidates think about the current capital meta? Please react if you want to weigh in. And we'll start with Nuke. Go ahead.
Well, shockingly, that I have an opinion on this one. So the current capital meta, I think CSP has actually done a great job with the new dreads. The faction and the Lancer dreads have found good places. They're priced to the point people can use them, but they're not throwaway toys that everyone hated when dreads were less than a bill and you could drop 20 of them on someone and it didn't hurt your wallet. I think facts are still in a kind of weird place. They are strong. They're super expensive, but they are super strong, which kind of tends to make them a big boys only toy, which is what CSP wants to move away from. When they have done with dreads, because dreads have gotten a lot cheaper comparatively. Carriers absolutely still need a look. Carriers got nerfed into the ground really, really hard and never recovered, but they have to stay nerfed into the ground as long as skynetting is a thing in the game. As long as you can sit on tether and have your fighters over else on another structure bashing it or on a gate killing stuff, carriers kind of have to remain awful, because if they're good and can do that, it's rough. So I think if CSP wants to make capital meta better and fix carriers, a buff to carriers has to come simultaneously with a removal of that skynetting. Otherwise, we're just back where everyone hated them again.
All right, thank you very much, Nuke. And that brings Rots up next. Floor is yours.
Like Nuke, I strongly agree in the same exact words. Carriers can be buffed. I don't personally use my carrier and haven't used it in some time. However, it has to come simultaneously with some structure-related changes. A lot of capital meta changes, I feel, will probably fall into the same line. I do feel we're in a good spot with dreads. I do. I think I'm personally one of those that feels, Tech 2 dreads could have been, without the lance, and they could have had maybe more turret hard points, that kind of thing. But I'm an Eve dreamer. I'm also one of those, someone asked me, is like, how do you feel about faction dreads, that kind of thing. I'd love to see more pirate related things. I would love to see things that kind of fall in line with what we do with the Navy stuff. I'm actually really happy with where those landed. The mechanics around capitals right now, a lot of what we don't see in capital warfare is large loss in our large supers and titans. M2 was a great example of it going well, but because of how tie-dye is, and it's the fact of large amounts of players, in large ships, it doesn't lend itself to large actions where things are dying. I'd love to see a world where CCP is making it so that we have the availability to kill them more often. It's always been a problem in my eyes in the game is, I wish I saw more of these things die. And so there's that balance. I don't have the answers to that, but I'd love to see capitals be looked at continually, and that can work to balancing them more favorably.
All right, thank you very much, Rots. Dujek, floor is yours.
I think that changing carriers to only being able to abandon their fighters at a much shorter range, say like 100 or 200 kilometers, would make it much easier to balance them in terms of increasing the power at the risk of being able to abandon and tether up immediately, so making skynetting harder. I think that my main issue at the moment is the difference in cost between Tech 1 and more premium dreads, where it still feels expensive to throw away the good dreads, like 6, 7 to 10 billion ISK faction dread fits compared to Tech 1 dreads that could be a bit more throwaway, given that they are not as premium.
Thank you, Dujek. Millant, that brings you up.
So currently, with the capitals changes, there's going to be a very interesting metas that are still being worked on. I personally think there is no way to actually train people particular carrier mechanics. That's why I've been pushing for a while the concept of an escort carrier, something that's much smaller than your standard carriers, but players can kind of get familiarized with the different mechanics, and then they can jump into larger materials. The other idea is also to add Navy carriers involved, and possibly also add both Navy fighters and also pirate things that do it. I've also had an interesting consideration due to some tests I've done where you'd think that the frigates, because fighters are fairly much on the same side of frigates, that frigates and smaller ships should be able to have a little bit more impact upon fights where carriers are involved, where they can mess up fighters and actually act as a counterbalance as well.
Thank you very much, Millant, and that brings up Yondu. Floor is yours.
So perhaps a different view on the topic because of the industrial side of why we have current capital meta as we have. We like Nullsec empires built all the capitals and their empires based on large rural mining operations back in 2017 and 2018, which ended up building thousands of capitals that we have for dirt cheap. And basically CCP decided to change how the BPC of the capital looks now, and it is more difficult to build it, more expensive to build it. And people, if they lose their capital, they are having it more difficult to replace it, which at the end means that the meta had to change in order to, for example, you don't see thousands of Titans being dropped now because you literally are not looking to replace them if you lose them. They cost hundreds of millions now, and they used to cost 40 billion to build. So the meta is there currently to be able to lose them rather than to save them, because we know there is thousands of dreads, thousands of carriers, thousands of Titans everywhere, but nobody wants to risk them. Even if there is a big capital battle like it was a week ago, where there were hundreds of dreads lost, you now see the problem of replacing these dreads, because the new BPC sort of takes you on the break because you do not have the components that are being dropped from, let's say, ghost sites, right? And that's the problem, that if you want to drop caps with a lot of hope, you need to have a way to replace them, and currently you don't have that way.
All right, thank you very much, and that brings up Dutch. Go ahead.
The capital meta is a bit of a weird spot where if you look at the capitals compared to each other, they seem fairly balanced. Where Titans lost the high angular weapons, which is good because that made them far too powerful. Super carriers tend to be oppressive, but then you've got carriers with the superiority fighters to tune them down a bit, and the dreadnoughts to be able to deal with most other capitals, and with high angular weapons to a limited capacity to the sub capitals as well. But the main issue is when you start using the numbers that have only gone up once people start to organize from alliances to the blocks, and when you start talking about block levels, it becomes a numbers game. So it's not in a good spot, but I think this is something that the CSM could definitely bring forth and spar with CCP based on the statistics that CCP can provide, and find a better balance for that position, where at one point the answer isn't just bring more capitals, and at the same time find ways that carriers, just besides the current crap sites, have other reasons to be in space.
All right, thank you very much. And for those on the Twitch stream but not in our Discord, we do have another candidate who unfortunately doesn't have a Mumble connection but is in our Discord, RGC Godfather. So I've agreed I'm going to read RGC's response to the question on the floor when their turn is up. And on the question of the capital meta, RGC says, I feel caps are better priced. All the cap fights I've been in, we've held back the caps unless things escalated, and we usually never did the escalation ourselves. We basically always held them back. I'm not happy with the changes that they have done with carriers, but dreads and facts seem good. Thank you, RGC. That gets through the reactions to the question. Are there any candidates that have not weighed in on the question yet that want to do so?
Yeah, I can real quickly. I really don't play with caps a whole ton. It's not quite my cup of tea, but definitely still do now and then. I think for carriers, they got tuned down a bunch since their application was too good and they got oppressive against subcaps and whatnot, and now we have high angle guns on dreads to deal with subcaps. I think one of the ways to make carriers a little better, since they do feel a little useless at the moment, is basically just don't try to make them compete with dreads in terms of damage dealing. Put them in a more ancillary role. Theoretically, E-War fighters have been kind of complete crap for a long time, but why not start making that their role potentially? Don't focus on the damage, since we've seen in the past that could very easily get overtuned and they just end up filling the same role as now the anti-subcap dreads. But maybe buffing up their E-War capabilities a bunch, you then have a capital-sized E-War platform, maybe to make them more specialized, but an ability to go through the E-War resistance of the siege on dreads. That's kind of a spitball idea, but just like how do we a way to make them useful without them simply filling another role, not as well as another ship that's there, but also not over-tuning them to the way that they were before. That was just kind of my thought on what I would try to do with carriers, potentially, to get them to fit in a little better.
Thank you, Dhuras. And yes, I know you said you weren't on Discord, so feel free to keep jumping in when I call for past reactions for sure. Thank
you for your patience.
Yeah, no worries. I thank you for coming. Are there any other candidates that haven't weighed into the question on the floor that want to do so?
I have a little bit on that. When I started, we didn't really have capitals, and then along came capitals, and one of the fun fights was seeing a dread for the first time drop in and try and shoot a POS that we were in. We managed to, I guess, snipe its supply can, and they changed their mind and led. But since then, it came to a point where dreads basically ended up replacing battleships in like low-sec and null-sec fights, I guess. And that was probably maybe a little bit too much. And then CCP did the changes, which swung it back the other way. But I think now a lot of low-sec people tend to definitely hold back on the capital fights, mainly because the cost definitely is a lot more now. And with all the specialist components, you've also got to compete with the nullsec groups wanting to buy those up for their capital fleets and supers. So one thing I thought was it would be good if they had maybe those materials dropping more frequently, and they could share the wealth around by putting them in like missions or more scans, DED sites, for example. But I think Dread's probably kind of getting to a better point now. They've come down a bit in price. Carriers, yeah, definitely got nerfed quite a bit when the fighters were nerfed. So you've got no way to, support your fighters apart from pulling them in now, whereas before you used to be able to put remote reps on them. But I don't think many people are actually using them as much for many things apart from the big drops and sending the fighters out for the Dynet system. So yeah, it would be good to have a better niche area for them to work in.
All right, thank you very much. Any other responses before we move to the next question?
Oh, but one thing I was also going to add is now in low sec you've also got a whole lot of blocks that have supers and titans and that, so often they will just drop those in like 20, 30, and that kind of really just shuts down a lot of conflict in that space, because not many people are going to be up to taking that many on in low sec.
All right, any other responses?
I guess to kind of, this is starting to get away from a bit, but I guess just to piggyback off what you're saying about, I've experienced that people in low sec, they can just drop a crap ton of blops on things. As much as Sinowing's way better now that you can't put it on every single ship, if people remember the battle days when that was a thing. I think maybe improving some of the Sino counterplay would be good, because as it is, once someone lights the Sino, it's like, you're pretty much screwed. And in terms of counterplay to that, there's the mobile Sino inhib, which takes an entire minute to anchor and costs, it's a good amount of cargo space, it's 70 mil. I think improving that thing in some way, or even having an almost hick-like ship module you could have on some specialized ship to shut down Sinos in a local area, would be a nice bit of counterplay. Some way to deal with that. Since it's sorry. It's not great to have a mechanic where effectively someone can instantly move. It should be difficult to instantly drop significant numbers on someone to the point that they could not counter-escalate. We can't get rid of that mechanic. It's still a good general thing to have, but I think just having some better ways to shut that down would be helpful.
All right, thank you, candidates. Let's move to the next question for the floor. And that will be, this is one from yesterday, and I think we got some good responses. If there was one thing you could change about industry or the economy, what would it be? Please react if you want to weigh in.
You didn't post first direct.
And Nuke, go ahead.
I would say if there was one thing I would want to change about the industry or the economy in general, it would be to take a look at changing the T1 battleship prices. As it is now, there is virtually no reason to use them in a lot of fights over just going straight to faction, straight to TFIs. And I think their current price point is just a bit too high, and you'd be able to get newer plays into them a bit faster and have more fun with BS. Whereas, as it is now, they're so close in price to going up to the next level of better BS that they don't see as much use.
All right, thank you. Dujek, you're up.
Back in 2008, which admittedly is before my time, missions paid out a variable amount based on how popular they were. That system got discontinued at some point. I think that a lot of the efforts that people put into PvE in order to generate ISK for the economy shouldn't be paying out in ISK. It should be paying out in items and LP and other variable value currencies that scale up when there is a lot of inflation in the game. And having less disk and more associated disk sinks poured into the game will also mean that we have less inflation. A lot of the people here playing remember when Tech 1 battleships were 100 million or less, and cruisers and battle cruisers were much cheaper as well. And I think that that would be better for a lot of new players if things were cheaper, or at least the easily accessible parts of PvE that aren't in Potion or hard class wormholes or T6 abyssals were the best ways of making money and having more money in lower income activities.
Thank you, Dujek. Rots, floor is yours.
I agree with a lot of what he said. But my big one that I would love to change, I'd really love to touch on PI. I think PI can be looked at and really just revisited as a whole. Because PI does have a weird gap in when you can get the availability of the mechanics and the understanding as a new player. I think you could see a world with PI being balanced in a particular way, and then also looking at content drivers that also are within balance of how inflation works. Inflation thing that he just hit, Dujek specifically, was within the game. I want a world where our server specifically, for all different reasons, inflation in this game is a problem. There were years past where we had to fix that, and so I would love to come up with things that are specifically allowing us to watch inflation, but also allow new players to get more out of indie. I think it's a no-brainer for us to keep them here.
All right, thank you, Rots. And DutchGunner, that brings you up.
I would agree that the PI system could benefit from overhaul, but if I could only change one thing, I would say that I would like to see an overhaul of all of the loyalty point stores in general, and the Poshfin loyalty point store in particular, because there are just so many loyalty point stores that are redundant or don't really serve a point, that they're due for an overhaul, at least to help get more different corporations and hauling or other missions or Poshfin a lot more interesting and worthwhile to go after the LP stores and what's in it.
All right, thank you, Dutch. And Yondu, that brings you up next.
So one of the interesting points that was already made was the PI, but there is a space for PI which would fit well the phone app if you would think about it, because you can have it in game, but then you could monetize the phone app as well for easier, much more responsive system there. And also what might be interesting for the industry changes is, like CCP has introduced these new blueprints for the cabs, new blueprints for the battleships and faction battleships, but it hasn't actually introduced any change to the structure BPCs. So for example, you can build a Titan for 100 bill, but you can build one single Keepster for 140. And there hasn't been any change to how structures are built. So you can still structure spam systems if you want to. And that's probably something to add to the structure side. Can there be anything between a Sotio and a Keepstar as a structure? Or can we make structures more expensive and more risky to lose?
All right, Yondu, thank you very much. Next up will be Millant. Floor is yours.
I think there's been a lot of talk about and a lot of complaints about since the post-scarcity time, particularly in building ships, a lot of the new bros are a little frustrated because some of the materials and goods you cannot get unless you're down at low sec or some other high risk area, which depending on how much loss they have, they don't want to do it. But at the same time, things like LP stores, etc., have been kind of messed up because some, particularly those associated with faction warfare or faction LP zones, need to have insignias. There's not enough movement on insignias. If any of you were in the game before Scarcity and you remember the Resource Wars, they had the faction LP for that, had pre-packed ships that you could get with LP. And I'm surprised that it's not been re-added into the game only for faction warfare, so the faction war players might be able to get pre-packed. It's going to be low tier, T1 everything, pre-packed ship, and be able to just kind of run with it and reship. But if they want to go on the markets, they can buy and move stuff as they want to, fit it as they please. Now, that's one of those things, plus also that maybe we need to put some different ores. There's like the new A0 ores. There's some areas in this game that do not have enough access to it, or that access is so limited that usually it's cleared by downtime or after downtime. And some areas we've had changed NPC mining fleets, we still struggle with resources being stripped before players can get to it. And also that I think stations in high sec and low sec should use the star-based charter in the LP stores so that they are charged for that, and then it actually incentivizes people to either go to wormholes or out into null sec in order to put states up without extra costs.
All right, thank you very much. RGC Godfather has a weigh-in that I'll read. Says, I'll start by saying what's near and dear to my heart and say Heck is the superior trade hub and Jita is garbage. Remember, this is not my opinion. He
Here,
says,
here.
So jokes aside, I'd like to see the other trade hubs get as much love as Jita. I remember Heck never had under 1,000 people. Now it's likely to get 100 steady. I agree with what's been said so far around Tech 1 battleships needing a real look. I have a Maelstrom from 2009 that I got for a fraction of the price it's going for now. I've spent most of my years in-game actually running Market and Heck. Market and incursions are typically how I get my ISK. Thank you, RGC, for the weigh-in there. That gets us through the candidates that have reacted. Did anyone else want to weigh in here?
Yeah, I can real quick. Mine will be short. I'm definitely someone who's on board with the please fix Tech 1 battleship industry train, but I would add into that the pirate faction, just in the entire pirate faction ship kind of lines in general, since they all had the same similar items in their history. They were added the T1 battleships into them. Most of them are so expensive to build now. The blueprint copies that drop are worthless. You go out and you do an escalation, you get a blueprint copy that drops for a Cinnaball or a Phantasm or something. It's worth squat because it's so much to make now. So I think looking at those would be good too, because faction, or I guess specifically pirate faction battleships, while good, price point compared to what say Marauders do right now, not great. So I'd like to see that added into the kind of that industry relook.
All right, thank you. And any other candidates that haven't weighed in on this question that want to?
1 point. PI changes, I disagree with how they were done. We should have been buffing all the ships and other materials surrounding it. It's like there's better storage, better flow of links, etc. that would have made it simpler to move. Because the current fitting set means perfect conversion, and then on top of that, it means there's smaller items for PI, which means there's less targets in space, less people moving around, and it means that they're not going to have as much content around for people to shoot at. I've also thought about the idea of actually re-adding the concept of orbital bombardment. We need to have some sort of PI function that can disrupt somebody's PI links, PI setups, attack them, so that they're just not sitting there just making ISK all the time. So contracting off the POCOs so that people, if you don't want to move it yourself, you can contract somebody to move it for you.
All right, thank you. And any other responses before moving to the next question? All right, so the next question for the floor. What element of the user interface would you change first? And Nuke, go ahead.
I would change the corporation window. That thing has not been touched in over a decade. And it makes, if you are trying to start your own corp or simply trying to work within corp roles, it is absolutely terribly awful. I was really, really hopeful that the Viridian expansion, because it looked like they were going to be touching corporation stuff, would have helped with this, but it hasn't. And it's just been untouched for so long. The whole role system is painful. If you're a new player trying to manage your own corp, or you're just a new player, shouldn't be really managing their own corp. But if you're new to managing a corp, you've been playing for a few years and you decide you want to start with your friends, it's one of the reasons why you need out of game tools like Auth so much, because managing stuff in game is just an awful experience.
Thank you, Nuke. Dujek, floor is yours.
I want to expand on what Nuke said with some specifics. I think that when removing somebody from a corp, you shouldn't have to wait to drop the roles, as you do have to now. And the roles do not match with what people do in corps. The corps need to be different in a way of, like, who can attend to structures without unanchoring them. Like, maybe a difference between people who can anchor stuff and unanchor stuff. Roles for, like, fueling and so on are very important to a lot of groups, but you end up burning out leaders in the game because they can't ask for help when they have to do stuff themselves, because granting the roles to adequately help them at the time would also give people the keys to the kingdom and be able to burn it down if they wish to.
All right, thank you, Dujek. That will bring Rots up next. Floor is yours.
Hey, this is one of my big campaign things. I'm a big corporation community guy. This is one of those that you can inherently affect the community, is by working on corporation UI. Here, I've got corporate logos and insignias, like hello. Projects. I love the mechanic. We can expand on it. I think one of these I mentioned is you could totally make projects something where your corporation is creating missions for players, directly creating a bridge for new players to come into a corporation and still feel like they're getting that. But now you're doing it with the community. Do I have the answers for that? No. Work with a team on it. Titles. Right now, my biggest is if I'm corporation, I colored titles in the actual code for the colors, and then I have to build them 6 hours. I've spent months setting
And sorry, Rots, we're losing you completely there. Are you still there? Okay, I do apologize if you're still talking, because we just can't hear now. So I'm gonna move to Melicien at this point. The floor is yours.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, obviously my first answer was corporations. I've been playing the game for almost 20 years, and I finally, for the first like 15 years or so, I played with really close friends. So I didn't have so much need for like the access list struggles and stuff, right? It was just like, okay, everybody's a director, everybody has what you need, right? But now that I'm playing with like other people, right? Not just my like real life friends I can punch in the face if they rob me. I feel like I need more granularity in the whole access list, like the between base level member with no roles and director, there's not really a lot of granularity in the game that makes sense. That's like it's just hard for me to give anybody any roles without giving them ways to rob me. And I'd like to be able to promote people. You know, I'd like to be able to like, hey, you're this role, you're that role, without being like, okay, now which thing behind this access list they could be able to mess me up with. But yeah, that's about it. Just granularity in roles. Like, there's not a lot of it's not intuitive for people who are not deep diving in the access list to see, to have roles between rank member and director. It's tough. But I mean, that's me as an old player coming into it. So I imagine it's more confusing for other people.
All right.
And that's
thank
all.
you. Thank you very much. Yondu, floor is yours.
I would touch the subjects of my fellow postboy pilots, everybody who is gunning citadels and doing stuff with the citadels. If you board a citadel, basically, you have the same HUD for the citadel as you have for the ship. But I sort of find it like if you're playing on a larger resolution display, those buttons are extremely tiny there. I believe there should be a look into how the citadels have their own HUD, dependent on which citadel you're in, or having a look at the general HUD that you have for the ship to be sizable, scalable, or to have the buttons there that would actually be clickable even on larger screens. So that would be one of the UI elements that I would want changed.
Thank you, Yondu. DutchGunner, floor is yours.
There are several things in the UI in general that just overwhelm you with the information. People that have been playing for a longer time have had certain options with the columns or how drone settings work be replaced. So that's a bit unfortunate. But if there's one thing I really think that needs changing, is definitely the corporate UI, because it's so hard to figure out if I give a person this role or these authorizations, not any roles, does it do what I want them to do? If something isn't working, where is the mistake? What do I need to fix? The structure the structure access is incredibly difficult when you have to start working with standings, and you start getting things if you're in an alliance where you have to balance out where alliance standings might overrule your corporate standings. So it's definitely the corporate interface that needs a major overhaul.
Thank you very much. And Dario, you are up next.
Yeah, I find with the Proton, some things have got better, but some things are also still kind of in progress there. And I know with a lot of the windows, some of them are absolutely ugly still, and we could do with a little bit more customization there. Maybe sort of definitely variation in the color scheme so you can actually get more readability out of it. And yeah, a lot of those windows there could use much better help and sort of in-game guidance on what they actually do. So I've spent quite a few years playing with the corporate window interface, and I think I probably know most of the bits in there, but yeah, it definitely takes time and a lot of it's trial and error. Sometimes the errors are a little bit scathing, but it would be good now that we've got the ACL, the kind of like custom access lists, that a lot of those functions in the corporate roles and that could also be moved to like an ACL type structure with a little bit more of a description on what actually everything does and what it does give access to and what it doesn't. And then that way you'd at least be able to set up, kind of custom settings and just, drop those onto people to give them the right roles that you need, which would definitely save a lot of time from clicking. Yep.
Thank you very much. Millant, you are up next.
I think most of the part of the UI, some of my biggest gripes with it have been like the UI likes to reset a lot every time we do changes or something happens with the server. I really think that we need to have some sort of basic capability that's in the client that allows you to save or save a preset, so that if you decide to uninstall the game and reinstall it on another system, or you upgrade your system, it's not immediately running you and then you're having to scratch, refine everything. I also think that colors, not only for like bookmarks and also on map bookmarks, are important. That allows you to identify locations and places that you've been, maybe get something in an item, maybe even add icons that can be adjusted by players on maps and other places. Also, the thought process as well as the UI itself, like the contact system and the threat, between red, orange, gray, blue, light blue, blue is kind of not very contextualization. It'd be more interesting if the UI had more colors or patterns. We have people that have both sight and hearing issues. We need things that actually allow people to see and do what's going on, so that people can understand what's saying. The UI is, to say the least, very counterintuitive in certain areas. We do have icons that look the same, like the star map and the market map are basically looks like an inversion of each other. And if you don't explain that to players, they usually tend to get confused by that, and some interesting hilarity ensues sometimes. Maybe they need to do some of the icons need to switch to something like more of an international icon system. Not all, but some of them, people understand what's going on.
Thank you, Millant. I'll read out RGC Godfather's answer to this one now. It says, I feel the corporation needs a serious rework as it's the same setup it's had for years. Could be made so much easier, not even mentioning it could have more corp logo designs and colors. Newer updated and titles, especially with structures being a thing, making title colors a thing without us having to use hex codes. And thank you, RGC. Dhuras, I see you let Seamus know on the Twitch, so go ahead, the floor is yours.
Sure, yeah. I think for me, it would be a somewhat more general fix of, I think sometimes the UI team over the past several years has had the idea of like, let's make it look pretty as opposed to functional. And they've added in and made changes that generally make things take up more screen real estate, but don't actually give any extra info. And those have been frustrating to say the least when those have come through. So I'd like to see them focus on that. They've got their Excel partnership, just lean into the joke. We all know it doesn't look good. We just need the information quickly. I think especially that's a problem with like some of the stuff in the agency window. There's also a lot of stuff in there that's not super functional. You cannot, you can set up some, if you're searching for ESSs, you can set up some filters, but you cannot in any way sort or order that list you then get. So then if you want to look at what's close versus what's valuable or something like that, you need to scroll through that entire list of whatever you've searched to actually see maybe what's near you want to care about. So a general focus on functionality over looking nice, I think, is what I would like to see happen.
Thank you very much. And that brings us through the candidates that have reacted. Has any candidate that has not weighed in on the question want to do so? Okay, then I will move to the next question. I'm going to take a slightly modified question from the Twitch chat. Question for the floor. How would you change skill training? Go ahead and react if you want to weigh in. And Dujek, go ahead.
Remove the 14 skills. Clearly. There's no fun being told, oh yeah, you can join this ship, fleet, you can fly the ship, you can equip the guns, you can do everything, but you don't have enough power grid. Or you don't have enough CPU. Or you're not fast enough to keep up with the anchor. Just get rid of the 14 skills so people can start training what they're going to do and have fun and not sit there for 4 months waiting.
Thank you, Dujek. Nuke, the floor is yours.
The two changes I would want to see to skill training as it is the long-awaited removal of attributes and remapping would be very helpful for new players, so they don't. I know a lot of new players who have essentially they could remap to train faster, but they're scared of wasting a remap, and that whole decision making I think doesn't have any actual benefit to the game, and just setting people so they have the same training speed as they properly mapped attributes would have no downsides really. The other thing I'd want to change is to have another look at the starting skills that new players start with nowadays. Those could definitely see a bit of a look. I don't know if we should be fully removing some of those support skills, but simply starting them with a bit of a higher level, or there's some skills that it's still a little bit surprising that they have no levels in at all to start. And that whole set could just use a look over by CCP, I think.
Thank you, Nuke. Rots, the time is yours.
be brief. Hopefully you can hear me.
Sorry, Rods, we're only getting every other sound. Yeah, please, Rots, by all means, go to what RGC is doing, and I will happily read it for you. Okay, so I'm going to, because I keep going last based on not being in Discord, jump down really quick, and Dhuras, the floor is yours.
Hey, I think the thing I would do would actually be I would move these daily skill SP things you can get for like kill whatever 2 NPCs or whatever. I would see if we can maybe move that to some randomly spawning anomalies around that people can find and get the skill points in. I think that would get people out in space more and actually get people maybe to have something they might even, if it spawns in say low sec null sec wormholes, they might actually want to maybe fight over. The current dailies, it's kind of laughable. It's like go kill 1 or 5 NPCs that barely actually get someone to log in and do something anyway. Have it out there be something people actually want to like go out and find. I'd like to see that change made.
Thank you, Dhuras. DutchGunner, floor is yours.
Mentioned it last year during my campaign as well. It's in my current campaign as well, where I'm just going to say keep the attributes, but instead remove the current punishing 1-year cooldown before you can remap again. Because if you mix your attributes correctly, you can advance the training time so much for both new, medium, and long-term players that instead of getting rid of it, just make it more available, more explainable. Like, hey, if you get started, remove the 2 from charisma, put 1 in intelligence, 1 in perception. Then later on, you can remap to specialize for spaceships, weapons, like gunnery or missiles, just go full perception and the rest in willpower. And having a much shorter cooldown, like maybe a month tops, will make people be far more willing to experiment and figure out, hey, if I want to do this, I can set up my attributes this way, and now I'm catching up in the way that I want to catch up. Or even get rid of the cooldown completely.
Thank you, Dutch. Dario, that brings you up next.
I kind of think we've got enough complexity in Eve as it is, and I'd kind of be happy if they removed the attributes, just give everyone a level playing field so you can all train at the same speed, and then you also don't have to worry about whether it's perception or social or intelligence or anything like that. You just train the skills kind of pretty much as fast as you can for each level. But it would be also nice if the new players started off with the higher pool of skills, basic skills that they're already trained up in, because you kind of start the new player experience not as like a newborn. You've got some experience or history behind you to get to that stage, so they could at least give you the basic required skills to get going faster, and then maybe also get skill points from completing certain key points or milestones in the game, because we've got the system now that kind of tracks some of your progress and gives you little gifts. It could also give you a lot more sort of skill points to help them catch up a lot faster and get into more useful ships and be more combat capable, or capable of doing other tasks they want to do in Eve without having to wait time to do it.
All right, thank you. We have 2 responses from candidates in Discord that I will read. The first is from RGC Father, stating, no, as in no change. The skills take so long for a reason. This in WoW, you don't get max character in a week. I would, however, remove skill extractors and injectors. It's very pay to win. And thank you for that response. And then Rots with the microphone difficulty. First of all, thank you for joining in the first place. Sorry the mic's not working out too well, but I'll read the response happily. Says, for number 1, I would love to remove the magic 14. You can possibly turn these into achievement-based goalposts. X amount of skills in section reaches a different level X reward obtained, similar to career levels at the moment. And then number 2, remove attributes as a whole. If we insist on keeping them, reduce the cooldown. So thank you, Rots, for that response. That is all the candidates that reacted. Or sorry, we did get one more reaction. Millant, go ahead, and the floor is yours.
Okay. Sorry, there was a little confusion because there were 2 skill questions in there. The biggest problem if we do the removal of the attributes is that you're going to then feed into the problem of having the skill packs that are going to be sold. They're already, I've found out that they actually reset almost every year. So there's a possibility for people who have a lot of money already can actually get a lot more skills, jump up the tree real fast and quick. The attributes allow players to move up and down the system. I did do a project called Project Synergy. We did actually figure out you could get the new player, if you did certain things, you get the new player into every single ship within 2 weeks at 3, which is level 3, level 1. But that keeps you outside of all the T, etc. That would allow people to get in. But I do understand that we need to change the skilling so where we can make it where it's functional. As DutchGunner has pointed out, yes, we need to actually have the cooldown for the new remap. Probably needs to be maybe 6 months. I would think that'd be probably wise. 3 months would maybe be too much, but it could possibly be done. Some of these items, because some of the skills, even if full attribute, are almost a month by themselves. Another issue as well that I want to point out to everybody, next time you're in the game, check the skill, look at it. There are too many things in this game that you only need to do level 1 with, and suddenly you're unlocked a whole bunch of different modules and materials. No progression reward system. So if you progress in your skills, like for particular modules, you don't have new things unlocking, and it doesn't reward and incentivize further skilling. So there's a shortcut. There are also 3 starts for skilling in this game. There are 3 starts, and there's one for standings, one for boosters, and one for cybernetics. And underneath that, that's all your PvP unlock for the ships. That might need to be some review, and maybe even we have to return to maybe one of the older EVE concepts of basically starting bonuses, depending on how you start, what you choose. Maybe the NPE choices, ideas like Enforcer, Miner, etc., could possibly, after you've done the NPE, you decide to choose something as your reward, and it gives you a skill preset, not but enough restart.
All right, thank you, Millet. Sorry about that. And then Melicien, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I think everyone's discovered really good options. Attributes are pretty wild. We either need to drastically cut down the remap time or remove them altogether. Magic 14, it's such a gatekeeping process. The only thing I would say that I don't think I heard anyone say is maybe just slashing training time across the board. I'm not sure how to do that without like destroying skill economy or whatever, but I think that the training times were really, they're just they're from a bygone era, and you could like cut training in half and still have one of the still have an extremely hard game to get into. You know, like nobody likes. I hate being a new player in the game and being like, okay, to be at the bare minimum to do what we need to do here, you need to train for 120 days. So, you know, that's just wild. It's just wild to tell people that. And that's about it for me.
All right, thank you. That does get through the candidates that have reacted. So were there any other points from the candidates on this question on the floor?
I would like to respond quickly to Dhuras, who was talking about reworking Skilling Spree, and I absolutely agree. I actually quite enjoy getting up in the morning and doing a bit of a Skilling Spree before I do other stuff, but so many of them at the moment are absolutely horrendous, and having to kill 25 trigs in the Abyss to get 10,000 skill points is like a 4-hour effort if you're unlucky with the rooms that you get and so on. So it definitely needs a rework.
All right, thank you very much. And then were there any other responses that any candidate would weigh in on? Okay, so we'll move to the next question, also from the chat, based on a request from candidates in the chat. Question for the floor: what are your opinions on the current logistics mechanics, as in the ships, healing ships? And Dujek, go ahead.
I think that there is a huge disparity between what is good in shields and what is good in armor. There are way more good armor ships in a lot of cases, but still shield reps keep the shield ships up for any big fight where instantly hitting reps is so important. I think that it definitely needs to be reworked a little bit if the goal of the game is to have a wide variety of ships that are good in different situations. As a tournament player, you see that you almost never see any shield ships in broad comps. They're limited to just a few archetypes in that because of the shield mid-slot hogging problem. So I would definitely like to take a look at having both tank types be more viable in more situations.
All right, thank you very much, Dujek. Nuke, the floor is yours.
I would say the main issue I see with the main issue I would want to point out with Logi right now is that Surgical Strike kind of really hammered T2 Logi cruisers hard in terms of their survivability, and it pushed hard into one of the reasons you see Fax used so much more often now, because T2 Logi simply hit the point where they cannot survive in a fight a lot sooner than they used to. I think that could definitely be looked at, as well as there needs to be some sort of option for subcap Logi that isn't cruisers. A Logi battleship that isn't, we have the Nestor, it's a token Logi battleship, but an actual, for both armor and shield, dedicated Logi battleships would do a lot to making it so Fax just isn't always the answer to everything, because Logi cruisers just don't live anymore.
All right, thank you very much. And Dario, floor is yours.
Yeah, I think the cruisers have kind of been set in that kind of little plateau for quite a while. They've had like a big boosts in kind of damage output, and the kind of logistics haven't really kept up with that. So there's been some fights I've been in where by the time we even get locked on the ship, it's gone. So when you get these really busy battles, that's why the Logi cruisers tend to be left behind, and they all go for faxes instead, because they at least can lock a lot quicker when they're sieged up and rep a lot harder. And I think also that's why the Lashak has became quite a powerful platform, because it's kind of spider tanking also helped give them advantage in a lot of situations. But in one area, I think around like structures, one thing I thought would be cool is if you could have a structure kind of with a specialist support role, where, if you had remote reps coming from your structure that were a lot more powerful, that would make it a lot more interesting in battles and fights. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm going to jump down on the reactions and call up Dhuras next. The floor is yours.
Yeah, I think similar to what some other people were saying, I think Shields does not have enough good options for some kind of like tinkery options. When we got the Trigs and the Nestors, is like armor, great. We have all these interesting things you can do some kind of like small microgang stuff with, where you've got these reps. Shields already suffers from, you will not have many utility mids, which is really hard if you're doing smaller gang stuff and you really need every little bit of utility you can get. And yeah, there's no good options that Shields have compared to armor for doing that kind of stuff, where you've got a cruiser, a frigate, destroyer, two battleships that can all do bonus remote reps, and you have SWAT for shields. You got the Thunderchild, which was crap. I'll also say a small module oversight that they could fix. We have remote tracking enhancers. We have no remote guidance enhancers. They never actually ended up adding those. So I think those are the things I could see that could use improvement.
All right, thank you, Dhuras. That brings up Millen. The floor is yours.
In of my testing on CC, I decided to goof with some of the shit, logistics, etc. There is some interesting things where logistics themselves can actually buff longer range depending on the module you put in. So like you put like large logic on a T1, you actually get extreme range, but also very, very large capability to repair a ship. Most people usually do the size of the ship that they have. You can goof around with small stuff, and you have to get close. That's one of those issues there. But there's also mechanics in the game that I do know of, because I've actually done this before. I ended up doing the FFA. When we had the FFA skilling stuff, I actually was dueling somebody in LowSec. He actually had a rep ship on us, and we were repping each other. He actually went suspect. But as just like RC has said, we probably need to make some adjustments to those particular mechanics. So like if something in faction warfare, they can't just third-party logi anybody. And, just, oh, look, we can do this, and that faction warfare, can get free reps from somebody else. There's also a lot of issues with the logi itself, because there's a lot of things that buff it, and there's also a lot of mechanics that also, buff the shield versus armor. There's also some questions about how different weapons affect different systems of armor and shield. Like currently, right now, we have a booster that actually makes you capable of having 80% hull resist that can go for about 4 hours. And that's a pretty big thing that not a lot of people are talking about. But when you deal with the shield and armor reps, shields seem to go faster because they have some, but they've also got a unique skill that allows the shield to catch all the damage so it doesn't pass through. And so there's an interesting thing, that's why shields are usually keep alive, because you can quickly, rapidly on the start of the cell, start the logi and rep up. But if you do armor, the armor you have to go through a full cycle to apply. And that sometimes has a little bit of a hiccup where it's almost about maybe 1 or 2 seconds before the HPs apply.
Time check. Okay, thank you, Millen, and DutchGunner. That brings you up next.
I would say that Logi overall is in a good position right now with the change of diminishing reps based on how many remote reps are landing. The fall off is definitely improvement, and I think it's in a good spot that at one point, if there's enough incoming Alpha Strike, Logi shouldn't be able to keep a target alive regardless, especially if you have the option to not have all your reps land at the same time. In addition to some of the other things that have been brought up, I think that the difference between armor and shield logi is decent, considering that when you go for armor, you have your mid slots available for Ewar or any other support ships. Well, you have to give that up if you're in a shield fit and you're trying to keep your tank there to keep alive. So I think that distinction is a fair one. And overall, I do think Logi is in good position, but as I also included in my CSM post, I would like to see a shield equivalent of Nestor, and preferably in the income tech tree, because that would give another reason for people to actually side with income or fight against the Triglavians, because having a low mass battleship with shield reps would definitely provide more interesting options in space, such as Plushfin and wormholes.
All right, thank you. And Millen, sorry, your mic was live. Okay, I see you put on your local mute there. All right, and next that brings up our, text-based answers in the chat. So RGC Godfather says, only issue I have with Logi are the neutral Logi involved in faction warfare. Something needs to be done about that. You have faction warfare guys sitting on an enemy station using neutral Logi with no reaction or consequence. And then Rotz has provided a text-based response for me to read. Says number 1, survivability for cruiser logistics. An ADC type mechanic or a review of the whole attribute as a whole are worth visiting. Number 2, want to see more Excuse me there, sorry. So number 2, I want to see more logistic cruiser holes and types. Number 3, I would love to see logistics holes with bonuses for the remote modules again. And number 4, logi mechanics and low sec, etc. It gets messy. So I believe that gets us through all of the reactions. Were there any candidates that have not weighed in on this question that wanted to do so? Okay, so we are going to go to the final question for the floor. We're going to treat it as a little bit of a quick fire round, see if we can get responses in around a minute this time. So the question for the floor is, how do you, oops, hold on, sorry. How do you see the game creating content that best leverages player-driven stories? React up if you want to respond. And Dujek, go ahead.
I would like them to be tied into the stories that we have currently going on, have been pretty good, but I would like them to go a bit slower. Like finding the gates being over in a day and a bit felt very unrewarding. That it was hard to be a part of it if you weren't already like incredibly invested. I think that the barrier to entry should definitely be lowered in that kind of event.
All right, thank you, Dujek. Nuke, go ahead.
I think I took this question a slightly different way because to me, I thought you were asking more about player-driven stories and the player stories of these alliances are fighting. Here's why this happened. Players' activities, not necessarily the developer-driven narrative story with the lore. And in that case, I think CSP does a pretty good job with leveraging that. Their weekly rundown articles they tend to do give a good overview of what players have done and what the player-driven conflicts and stories are happening currently. I think all that needs to be done for that is just to create better tools and better opportunities for players to have content and conflict with each other.
Thank you very much. Melicien, the floor is yours.
Let's see. I guess I agree with Nuke on that front. It is pretty good right now. I just wish it would be like slightly more to the forefront. For example, like the bottom tickers on the scope articles are really cool. Like especially when they mention like player groups and what's actually going on. So maybe a little more expansion on that kind of stuff would be nice. But overall, I think it is pretty good as it is. I'd see more of it though.
Thank you very much. Millant, floor is yours.
I actually do think that, there is a lot of stories and stuff in here, but there's also a lot of stuff that really isn't talked about in the sidelines. When we had one of the recent events, I remember being down in Losec, and there was somebody who was going around and he was killing very specific NPCs. And I've been in those areas for a long time. I was like, those NPCs are not something that's normally here. But there was no notification in game that there might be unique NPCs floating around on different locations to kill. And so it was probably part of the storyline in this. But, the other thing is also some of the more recent events have really kind of put a lot of people who've done a lot of effort in these events. They've not been able to get notification or at least some sort of recognition of what they've done. And there is also the other issue that, CCP, if they want to, they can completely, if they decide to, they can retcon a event and make all the effort of a certain player completely invalid. So that's something of an interesting issue.
Thank you, Millant. We'll give you a second to mute up your mic again here.
Okay, one sec.
And then DutchGunner, the floor is yours.
I think CCP is on the right track with what they're doing now, with giving incentives like, hey, this is important. The mentions of player efforts in the news in short, in the New Eden News, or the main stories, the bottom news, the bottom subtitles in the Scope News videos. and being open for what players are doing, because I've been able to do things in the past that actually did get mentioned in either a bottom feed of the Scope News or in the New Eden News in short. So what I would like to see is maybe expand upon it more if dev time allows for it, so that there's too many things happening at the same time that people are unable to do it all and actually have to start making choices to make the choices they make have a bigger impact and make the game as a whole and the lore and the story a lot more dynamic and feel more alive.
Thank you, Dutch. Next, I'm going to read the response from Rots in the Discord. Says, this is another one of those things that is pretty close to my heart. I never thought myself an RPer, but it has happened with faction warfare till I wasn't engaged anymore. And while I'm typing this Nuke is matching, I took this in a couple ways too. I think honing in on CCP-driven narrative, I believe this is the best opportunity to create large epic arc content that gets us closer to the idea of expansions or DLCs. Have some of these things driving large EVE Online global changes is something we should support. So making sure the mechanics, notifications, UI, etc. are all letting us do this is what we need to drive the nail on. Big shout out to the new CCP hires for this, and I look forward to EVE storytelling. And thank you, Rots, for that response. And sorry, one moment. Please make sure to hold reactions if for the candidates. That will bring up Yondu next. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So I would probably touch the same thing as Rods mentioned, that CCP currently introduced the topics of the Pohven region. Now they're introducing us the new gates, and whoever knows what's behind those gates, right? So sometimes they create this content that is there, like Dujek mentioned, just a blip, like the Turner event, basically a content, but it sort of doesn't do much to the game. So I would probably love to see more to the content for the NPCs also in the industrial sphere, not only to destroy ships, to buy stuff for them, to find something for them, or to I don't know what, but also to build something for, I don't know, can you imagine that you would build with Amar Empire the station, for example, in Mijnwerker territory for their offensive, to have more dynamicity for these sort of NPCs as well, because I think that would be a lot of fun to have dynamic NPCs and NPC regions being changed over time, not stagnant as we have now. You could push very much like Pirate Faction, let's invade Amar space with a Sancha, for example. So I think there is some options that could help the game and the players to be much more in the game rather than finding what to do with Turner event.
Thank you, Yondu. Dhuras, that brings you up next.
Yeah, it's kind of going back to the focus of my campaign is give people more ways to affect their space, let them put their mark on it a little more. Some additional structures, some more experimental things that people can put out there. Maybe some more customization for people's stations. You dock in my Astrahouse or Fortizar, it'll look exactly the same as if you docked in absolutely anyone else's. People will care about what they're doing more if they can customize it more, and we can anchor some things outside, the 9 current structures we've got pretty much. Maybe we can see some more interesting stuff out there. So that's what I'd like to see.
All right, thank you, Dhuras. And that gets us through the reactions, I believe. So were there any candidates that haven't weighed in on the question that wanted to? This is the final question, by the way.
Yeah, I was just going to add that it would be cool for just general players if some of those lore events and that were also maybe tied into storyline missions or just missions in EVE, so they could get random missions that, it seems just like a normal mission, but it actually has an outcome that affects something in the game. I suggested something like a supply mission could help boost the spawning of like factional warfare sites or the ships that are in them. And whereas if they have like an interceptor mission, they could, help reduce the number of defenders that end up in some sites. And then even though they're small and the player may not think, I want to go out of my way to try and figure out what's going on and get involved, they can still have some impact on the universe there.
Thank you, Dario. Was there anyone else who wanted to weigh in on this final question?
I will. The major thing that I'm thinking about is that the personalizations of the ships and things, there's been some complaints made that unless you have a station out, you cannot use personalizations. And there's a lot of corps who would like to have the capability to personalize via their offices and then be able to look and do this. I personally would like to see us be able to swap between various NPC corps and also be able to show off personalizations based on those NPC corps. And a lot of people would like to do that for role-playing.
All right, thank you, Millant. Give you a second there. And any other comments before we wrap up here? Okay. Well, that was the final question, so just a bit of wrap up here. First, of course, all candidates, thank you very much for coming today. Eve University and myself, thank you for attending this event. I hope that we continue to do this on a year-by-year basis. For the candidates, you are absolutely welcome at any time to join in on Mumble and Discord. You can campaign in our public channels there. Please feel free to do so. You can answer questions outside of campaign season, just chat. More than welcome anytime. But whether you do that or not, thank you very much for coming today. I wish you all the best of luck in the elections. And on the matter of elections, candidates, you won't see it too much because it'll be Eve University internal Discord channels. But I can assure you that I and the rest of the directors will be pushing our members to be voting throughout this next week. For those that are on our Discord or on our Twitch, thank you very much for joining today. A couple just little admin things. Candidates, I hope that you think that this went well today. The last 2 days have been a lot of fun. If you did have any feedback for me that you can think of maybe after the event here, I'm going to hang around on Mumble for a little bit, but beyond that, please feel free to shoot me a message, Discord or in-game, whatever. Definitely looking for ways that we can improve the format for future CSM election seasons. And for everybody on any of our channels listening in here, please remember that CCP has their final day of interviews with candidates starting in about half an hour here on the CCP Twitch. So I highly encourage everyone to attend that. With that, thank you very much, everyone, for attending, and have a great day. Good luck, candidates.
Thanks for hosting and having us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for hosting.